Good morning, everyone. I am Martha Zavala, President of the League of Women Voters of the Pasadena area. Welcome to Thursday with the League, Affordable Housing Basics. We hope you're all doing well and staying safe and healthy. Election day has come and gone. However, we still don't know whether we will have a change in administration. According to news reports, President Trump has amassed 214 electoral college votes, and former Vice President Biden has 253. And as of this morning, the Senate results stood at 48 Republican seats and 47 Democratic seats. And as you know, a few key states are still counting votes, and late results do not imply any fraud. It reflects the effort to make sure that everyone's vote is counted. And just to be clear, these are reports that are being, these are results that are being reported by news agencies. So it will be weeks before the results are certified by states. And then the Electoral College will weigh in and be convened on December 14th. So it's going to take a little while, but one of the beautiful things about this election is that the number of people who exercise their right to vote, my understanding is that it's overall nationwide, it's 60% already. And they believe that after all the votes are counted, we're going to be going north of 66%. So we do need to continue to be patient to get those results. Anyway, I know you're excited about this morning's program. And so speaking of being patient, I know you came today to learn about affordable housing and what that looks like, what the situation is right now. So we've convened an excellent panel to explain a few things to us. And so what I'd like to do is now introduce Anita Mackey, who's going to address what's going to be covered this morning and who our speakers are. So the important thing is that this is being recorded, so you will be able to pay full attention to what they're saying. And in a few days, we're going to have this available on our YouTube channel for people to view and kind of go over again, because it's packed full of information. So now one of our specialists in housing, Anita Mackey. Thank you, Anita.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking our speakers for hanging in there. They were all originally scheduled for the April League Day during Fair Housing Month and agreed to come later when we canceled. Since then, our great team of volunteers has become quite Zoom savvy, and we hope you will all learn a lot about why it's so hard to expand the stock of affordable housing in our communities. Much of what we are about to learn will inform an update of our housing position, allowing us to advocate for policies that will increase the supply of affordable housing in our 13 cities, both for those currently homeless and for those low-income families that have to spend too much of their income on rent. Our first speaker is William Wang. Since 2008, he's been the housing director for the city of Pasadena. He heads a department that focuses on getting people into affordable housing and keeping them there. He has also been part of the Community Development Commission of LA County. His work has been so important to the development of affordable housing in our area that the California Housing Consortium placed him in their Hall of Fame in 2012. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I was asked to share on the role of the public sector in affordable housing. Like all good speakers, let me set my timer up first before we get going. I have it set up right here. Okay. So the role of the public sector in affordable housing, well, it's very extensive. So let me give you some reason why. The primary reason is very logical to most people, that affordable housing, sort of by definition, is typically not economically viable. Affordable housing means that the rents, if it's a rental property, or the sales prices, the purchase price of the units, if it's an ownership property, are affordable to people who are on limited incomes. And so because the rents are going to be low, for instance, in an apartment building, then there isn't the rents themselves don't provide enough revenue in order to go to a bank, for a developer to go to a bank, for instance, borrow the money and enough money to build the project. So that means that affordable housing projects need subsidies. Almost always, not always, but almost always, they need subsidies. Capital subsidies, which is the money to buy land and to construct the building. Those are referred to as capital dollars, basically to build the project. If the project is designed for very low or extremely low income households, for instance, like folks who are experiencing homelessness, then there also needs to be a rental subsidy. That means every month there needs to be a subsidy in to pay enough rent so that the property can continue to operate, pay for utilities, pay for property management, things like that, insurance, those sorts of things. And then again, if it's a population that needs services, then there will be subsidy to provide those services to the residents. People should understand, like for instance, when we talk about a homeless population, that homelessness is a symptom of other causes. So if you place somebody who is experiencing homelessness into housing, that takes care of the symptom, but it doesn't take care of the cause for why they don't have the income to be able to pay for their own housing. So services is often necessary and is a best practice in affordable housing developments that are designed for very low or extremely low income populations. So you might need, these projects typically need some sort of subsidy. You can't go to a bank to get a subsidy. Subsidies come from the public sector. All right. And so there are three ways to purposefully create affordable housing. There's really only three ways, and they all involve the public sector. For instance, number one, you can subsidize it, just what we were talking about. You can provide apartment builders, developers with enough subsidy so that they will agree that they can keep their rents very low. They can build a building and keep their rents very low for a long time. So how does the public sector provide the subsidies? Sometimes they contribute land or they sell land at below market rate prices. So city-owned land is a way to subsidize an affordable housing project. Sometimes there are very low-cost loans, below market rate loans. There are tax credits, there are bonds, there's rental assistance. That rental assistance means the rent that the public sector will help to pay the rent for the tenants once the building is built, that will help to pay the rent for the tenants as long as they need that kind of assistance. So one way to create affordable housing is subsidize it. Okay? Another way is to require it, to set up ordinances that require developers to provide affordable housing. One of the most common ways to do this is an inclusionary ordinance. Inclusionary ordinance. So Pasadena has an inclusionary ordinance. I believe there are 11 cities out of the 88 cities in Pasadena, in LA County, that have an inclusionary ordinance. So Pasadena being one of them. Some of the ordinances are very, very, you can say very mild, and some are very strong. So Pasadena is one of the stronger ones. So if an apartment developer is going to develop an apartment building of 10 units or more, then 20% of the units have to be affordable. So if it's a condominium ownership project, 20% of the units have to be affordable for households at moderate income. If it's an apartment building, then 5% are affordable at moderate income, 10% at low income, and 5% for very low income. Or if a developer doesn't want to build those units, include those affordable units in their project, they can build them off-site. So they can have another piece of land and they can build it off-site, or they could pay a very large fee to the city, and then the city uses that money to subsidize more affordable housing. Okay, so creating affordable housing, you can subsidize it, you could require it, or third way is you could incentivize it. That means you can provide incentives for a developer to voluntarily provide affordable housing. But once they provide the affordable housing, it's long-term restricted. They can't change it for at least typically for a very long period of time. So one way the state does that, the public sector does that, is with what's called a density bonus. So developers make more money by producing more units on a particular site. So if a site could hold 100 units, you can develop, the zoning allows 100 units. But if they agree to provide 11% of those units at very low income, then they're allowed to build an additional 35% more units. Okay, so they would restrict 11 out of the 100, the initial 100 units, they would restrict 11%, 11 of those to very low income. Then they can build another 35 units of market rate housing on top of their project. So they can have 135 units. 11 of those units would be for very low income. So this is a way to incentivize the developers to say, hey, you have to take less rent on some units, but we allow you to build more units at market rate where you can more than make up the difference. So it's an incentive. And there's also incentives with fee waivers and property tax waivers. So the ways to create affordable housing: subsidize it, require it, or incentivize it. The public sector runs all of those, is responsible for all of those ways. Okay. And so once a project is, a developer wants to build an affordable housing project, how do they interact with the public sector? Well, in the early stage, let's say they're just thinking about a potential project on a potential site. Maybe they don't own it yet, but they're thinking about, oh, this site might be a good site for affordable housing. How is the public sector involved? Well, the public sector is involved in the zoning of the site to determine how many units could be built on that site. Also, the developer would know, well, I have to get some subsidies to make this project pencil out. So they'd have to usually come to the housing department to find out, are there subsidies available for this kind of housing in this location? And then, of course, to get political and community input and approvals, they need to be engaged on the political side with the city council, for instance. Okay, and then once they buy the land, this period we call pre-development, from the time they buy the land to the time they start construction, right? A lot happens in there to be able to get this project now, secure the land, and then get everything lined up to start construction. So what do they have to do? And how is the public sector involved? The public sector is involved in a very significant way in terms of they need to go out there and now actually get the subsidies, not just know that subsidies are available. They need to go out and get them. So that means applying for funding, competing for funding, getting funding commitments. They need to, of course, get all their approvals for their project. If they need a conditional use permit or whatever they need, they have to go through the planning department to get that. In cities like Pasadena, we have design review, right? They have to design a project, they have to take it to a commission. Commission goes back and forth saying, oh, we'd like you to change this, change that. So they have to go through the design review process. There's environmental review, and there's plan check to make sure the plans meet all the building code requirements. So there's a lot of interaction with the public sector that the developer needs to undertake. And then once they start construction, the public sector, again, during the construction stage, is very much involved. They are involved, for instance, in issuing the permit to even be able to start construction. Then they inspect the project while it's under construction. And when the construction is finished, they give a certificate of occupancy to say this project was built according to the approved plans and specs and meets all the code requirements. Utilities have to be turned on and coordinated. That's all public sector, right? Water and power, gas companies, sanitation district, et cetera. Oftentimes, if they're using public money to build the project, there's a local hiring requirement. So that gets monitored. And then also when they get ready to lease the building up, right before construction, they start to market and lease the building up. Many jurisdictions like Pasadena we have a local preference requirement. So they have to follow our local marketing, local preference requirements. So we're very much involved. And then even once the building is done and it's up and running, the public sector is still involved. If their project needed and received a rental subsidy from the public sector, then the public sector, they need to work with the public sector to receive the rent payments every month. And then if there are services, then a service subsidy, then those services need to be coordinated. There might be tax waivers. And then every year they have to certify that they are renting to the right income people. So if the building is supposed to be limited to very low income people, there is a inspection and an audit process to make sure that they are renting them to very low income people and not to market rate people and making money that they're not supposed to make on those restricted units. All right, so the public sector is very much involved throughout this whole process. And let me just run through very quickly on some examples, okay? Real quickly, this is a map of Pasadena. It shows where all of our affordable housing projects are. So the projects are these larger circles, like this brown circle here, or that purple circle. Those are affordable housing projects. The little yellow circles, those are where folks who we provide rental subsidy to, like our Section 8 program, that's where they are located. So you can see them around here. And there's a few census tracts outside of the city of Pasadena that are part of our Section 8 territory. So we do have some folks out there in Altadena and a few in East Pasadena, but the majority are here in the city of Pasadena. And then the numbers here, those represent projects that are currently in the pipeline, which I'll talk about in a minute. You'll notice that the yellow areas here, there's very few affordable housing projects in the yellow areas. Why is that? That's because those are the R1, the single family zoned properties. So you wouldn't expect to see a lot of affordable housing in a single family zone. There are some where somebody will rent a house or a back house, for Section 8, that could be happening over here. But you won't see an apartment building, an affordable apartment building built in these yellow zones because that's for single family. We have a housing crisis here in Los Angeles County. So there have been attempts to figure out how to get some affordable housing into the single family neighborhoods without destroying the character of the single family neighborhoods. We're not talking about plunking down an apartment tower in a single family neighborhood, no. But there's a lot of land that's zoned for single family. So if we're going to address the housing crisis, we can't just say, okay, these large swaths of land, we're not going to involve in our affordable housing solutions. Okay, real quickly. So this gives us this is our current pipeline of affordable housing projects, and just take you down to the bottom. We have 904 units currently in the development pipeline of long-term affordable housing. Okay, this is a very high number for a city of our size, 23 square miles, 900 units currently in the pipeline. And that includes over about 200 that are currently under construction. That's this category here, under construction. So we have these 4 projects. In fact, actually, one more project, this one down here, actually needs to get moved up to this category because it just started construction just a few days ago. So, but we have 200 units under construction. We have 250 units where the city has already committed funding or has already committed, taken an action on that property. And then we have another 450 units here in just the pre-development stage, okay? And so under this column here, this column shows you at the bottom about 88 of these 900 units are inclusionary housing units. So these are units that Pasadena is requiring and developers are building, 88. Okay, so we have a very robust pipeline. And let me show you just real quickly an example of a few very quick examples. So this yellow area here, this is a site that's owned by the city, and it's a project that we call Heritage Square, north and south. It's 2 parts. It's on the corner of, this is Orange Grove here, and this is Fair Oaks here. This is Church's Chicken, if you're familiar with the territory area. So a few years ago, we developed an affordable housing project here. It's affordable senior housing for very low income seniors. And now we're getting ready to undertake a project over here, which will be more senior housing, but this will be housing for seniors who are homeless, permanent housing for them, because homeless seniors is our largest and fastest growing segment of our affordable housing, of our homeless population. So this is the senior housing project that was developed. It's 70 units, 1 manager's unit, and 69 units for seniors, very low income seniors. This is what it looks like from the street. This is inside, and this is also inside the community room. Okay, and then on the south side of the site, this is what we're planning to do. a new building. These units here will be for the seniors who are experiencing homelessness. And then there's some community rooms and commercial space on the corner. This is Orange Grove and Fair Oaks. Just real quickly, it looks like that. Looks like that. We're just starting on the design right now. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that in terms of housing in single family zones, so the city purchased this house from Caltrans and we're fixing it up, and it will hopefully within the next month be leased to four women who are experiencing homelessness will be here. Now, these are not the high acuity homeless population, but these are the low acuity folks. So folks mainly who are homeless because of economic reasons, which is the majority of the homeless population. So they will live here in a house. They will all have a bedroom. And then also, so this is the house here. It has a garage here, and we're working with Habitat for Humanity to build an accessory dwelling unit in the back to provide more affordable housing. So we're trying to do a demonstration project to show how affordable housing can fit within those single family zones. And now I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Anita, can you unmute?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. We had a little glitch this morning where one of our panelists was delayed. So in a moment, we'll be altering our speaker order a little bit. If we're going to have Q&A following the final speaker, please submit your questions by clicking on Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be screened to reduce duplications. Our next panelist is Ann Miskey. During her over 25 years of working with and for the homeless, Ms. Miskey has served as first executive director of Funders Together to End Homelessness, a national membership organization for funders focused on best practices to end homelessness. She then transitioned to a more hands-on organization, the Women's Downtown Center in Los Angeles, as executive director. And 2 years ago, she took up the leadership of Union Station Homelessness Services with major facilities in Los Angeles and Pasadena. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. And hopefully can everybody see that? Can everybody see that?
It's your desktop. It's not your screen.
Okay, is that working?
Can you share your slide?
I am. Is it not coming up?
I can see it, Ann. It looks good.
Okay, there we go. Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here today. So I am going to set my timer as well. So today I'm talking more about the human side of affordable housing. Bill and Cynthia are much more experts in terms of the actual development of affordable housing. And obviously with the work that I'm doing, I'm focusing more specifically on the homeless population, but also on those people who are really rent stressed, that are really on the verge of becoming homeless because of the cost of the housing. So some of this you will have seen before, and I'll try to go through it rather quickly. This just gives you an overview of the numbers of people experiencing homelessness in the United States, LA County, San Gabriel Valley, and in Pasadena. Just a reminder that this is on one night of the year. So this is what we call a point in time count. This does not actually capture all the people who fall into homelessness throughout the year, and it doesn't capture the number of people that are severely rent stressed. And by that, we mean people who have to make a choice often between paying rent, buying food, buying medicine. So you will see that the majority of those folks are individuals, some families. One of the things we know about affordability right now is that the people that are being hit hardest are seniors, people getting older because they are often on fixed incomes and the prices are going up. And also young families are being severely hit. And of course, with COVID, we know that what's going to fall out from that is probably going to be pretty bad. Just to give you a really brief overview, really, and this, if we talk about homelessness, what people often don't realize is that homelessness wasn't a thing before the 1980s. You know, a lot of us think that homelessness has been with us forever. In fact, that's not the case, other than very small numbers of people or more during the Depression. But that really up until the 1980s, it was not something that was very common in this country. But the reason for that is because up until the 1980s, from the Depression until late 70s, early 80s, the government funded affordable housing. And really it was, again, under first Nixon and then under Reagan that you saw the really complete turning away from funding of affordable housing. This is when we saw homelessness start to skyrocket. So if people tell you that homelessness is caused by mental illness or homelessness is caused by drug addiction, that is not true. Those things may make you more vulnerable to homelessness, but there are way more people with mental illness and drug addiction who live in housing. But if they can afford housing, really it is the lack of affordable housing that drove literally millions of people into homelessness in the early 1980s. And we've seen that trend continue, except for a few periods where we saw a downward trend really since that time. And of course, we're hit extremely hard in Los Angeles because of the cost of a housing. So again, I know you've been through this, so I want to just do this quickly. Right now, nationally, there are 30 units of affordable housing for every 100 extremely low income people. We're not even talking moderate income. This is the extremely low income folks. Housing assistance, which mostly comes through the federal government from HUD, serves only 25% of those who are qualify for it. And I think one of the things that we really need to pay attention to is that we continue, as much as we see affordable housing being created, and Bill just showed you the great work that's being done in Pasadena, but nationally we lose 2 affordable housing apartments each year for every one that is created. So even with all of the efforts around creating affordable housing, we are seeing the numbers go down across the country, which is just adding to the problem. This just shows you what it costs to rent a moderate 2-bedroom apartment. California is the second most costly rental market in the country after Hawaii. Again, this just gives you an overview of what it costs to rent, what your annual income is needed in California to rent an apartment, you know, how many hours you have to work at minimum wage to afford an apartment. If you are a family, if you need, say, a 2-bedroom apartment, and you're making minimum wage, you need to work 114 hours a week. Again, we have right now, and this is California, this is not nationally, almost 1 million deficit in terms of the numbers of affordable housing units available compared to what the need is. Again, in California, over 1 million, 1.3 million people are extremely low income. That's not low income and moderate, that is extremely low income. Now, again, I talked about homelessness rising because of the lack of affordable housing in this country. That is the cause of homelessness, lack of affordable housing, lack of good paying jobs. The interesting thing is that while the lack of housing causes homelessness, for many years, they didn't recognize that, oh, if we give people affordable housing, guess what? We can reduce and end homelessness. Instead, all of the money was put into the shelter system, what we fondly call the 3 hots and a cot model. And this was what was done for years and years. And what we saw were shelters growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there was no exit for people because affordable housing was really focused on people who were already housed and needed assistance, rather than on, if you became homeless, how do we get you back into housing? And sadly, this model still exists in many parts of the country, and the federal government is wanting to return to more of this model. the present administration. That's not been true during the Bush years or during the Obama years, who really understood that affordable housing was the end of homelessness. Oh my goodness. I apologize. So the good news is that in about the 1990s, early 2000s, they recognized that affordable housing was actually the solution to homelessness. And we're really looking at two different models of affordable housing that we use traditionally around the homeless population. One is the one that Bill talked briefly about, and it's what we call the housing first model. In other words, we get people who are experiencing homelessness into housing. That's the first thing we do. And then we provide supports to enable them to become stable, to become reintegrated into the community, to deal with any other issues that they may have, whether it be mental health issues, physical disabilities, whatever it might be. We surround them with services. One of the things that's important to remember about this model, because we hear this all the time, this isn't free housing. We're not saying, oh, great, we're going to put you in housing and you don't have to pay anything. In fact, in this model, renters sign leases just like you and I would sign a regular lease. They have to abide by the same rules that anybody else has to. And they also have to pay 30% of whatever their income is on rent, because that is considered the standard nationally for reasonable rent is 30% of your income. So that is permanent housing. We have a number of those buildings happening in Pasadena. We're trying to get more of that happening throughout the San Gabriel Valley, because Pasadena is actually, and kudos to Bill and his department, Pasadena is one of the best communities in Los Angeles County in terms of the number of affordable housing units that we have. We were the only community given an A by a media report recently around affordable housing. Now, the other model of affordable housing that we use for the homeless population is really geared towards those people who are simply economically homeless. They don't have a lot of other conditions that make it difficult for them to actually get a job or pay rent. So we give them short-term housing assistance to get into affordable housing. They may be on Section 8 vouchers. A lot of our work that we do, for example, would be helping them get an education or get a job that pays higher salaries so that they can take over their rents. But again, the need for extremely low income, affordable housing for these folks. Again, the number one reason for homelessness and people becoming homelessness in LA County is loss of job and income. So that's another model that we use. Now, when we think about affordable and supportive housing, so supportive housing is affordable, it just comes with those wraparound services. So that's the only difference. What people often think of is, I have a picture here on the projects from Chicago, really horrible, dense housing, all cement, no services. That's not what we use anymore. So when we get a lot of no, not in my backyard for affordable housing, the model on the left is what they have in their minds. We no longer use those models when we're talking affordable housing. One of the things, I had a conversation a few years ago, I was sitting down with the then Secretary of HUD under the Obama administration, and he told us something that shocked me. He said, by federal law, legislation, affordable housing could not have grocery stores within a certain radius of those apartment buildings. So not only did you recreate housing deserts, you created food deserts. You often had poor schools, you had no transportation. They were set up in a way to make people fail, to create ghettos and communities of poverty. Now you will see on the right our model of supportive housing. This is Pasadena, this is Marv's Place. It is, I will say it, the nicest building in the neighborhood. Because one of the things that we know about affordable housing is that your neighborhood, your zip code is one of the biggest determinants to your success and your health than anything else. And what we have traditionally done and continue to do is we tend to put affordable housing in the crappiest areas because that's usually the cheapest. And also it's because community backlash against having it in their community has been particularly intense. So we ghettoize people who are lower income, and then we create all sorts of problems because we have lack of access to transportation, to good schools, to good jobs, to all of those things. You create cycles of poverty, and then everybody goes, see, I don't want those people in my neighborhood because they're all criminals and they're all drug addicts. I'm like, you've created the very situation that creates unhealthy communities. So what we're doing now when we're talking affordable and supportive housing, and this is some work that we're doing at Union Station, is how do you integrate people into healthy communities? Because all of the evidence, and there has been a lot of evidence and a lot of research on this, is that people rise to the level of their neighborhood. So if you put a wealthy person into that building on the left of your screen, it is going to pull them down emotionally, physically, in terms of career, all of those things. However, if you put a person from that left building into the building on the right, into a healthy neighborhood and community, it lifts them up, and it lifts them up economically as well as emotionally, physically, all of those other things. So what we really are talking about now when we're talking about affordable housing is that we need to have integrated housing. Bill talked about models of, inclusionary housing where you have some market rent, where you have some low income. What that does is it removes stigma for people. It provides a healthy environment. And you look at someone and you don't immediately judge them based on their income or often based on their color, because we do know that the majority of people experiencing poverty are people, and homelessness are people of color. We recently there was an article that somebody had written to one of the newspapers here in Pasadena a while ago, talking about the development of the Colorado corridor, and talking about we don't want any quote unquote homeless housing. There's no such thing as homeless housing, just a note. If you're housed, you're not homeless. But they didn't want that homeless housing there in that neighborhood because it's a nice neighborhood. And I'm going, that is simply racism by another name. It's excluding people because of income from nice neighborhoods in our community. So we are really focused on affordable housing needs to be included within the community. Bill showed you the map. There's a couple of council districts that have the majority of housing projects. Sometimes, yes, it is because of single family housing, but we also know that politically it's because some politicians will do everything they can to keep out affordable housing in their neighborhoods. So again, we're looking at what are some of the policies we're looking at around affordable housing. Yes, in my backyard. Again, if you bring people into your community, it doesn't pull your neighborhood down, it lifts those people up. So we want to make sure we have more inclusionary housing. We are afraid a perfect storm is coming because of COVID. So we need to really look at eviction and rent moratoriums and how do we deal with that. Things like rent control. It's great to hear that you guys have back rent control. And we need to really look at how we make it easier for communities and easier for neighborhoods to build affordable housing and not let those small number of loud voices saying not in my backyard, but instead have voices say, welcome neighbor to my community. So thank you.
Thank you. And
let me stop sharing.
And our final speaker this morning is Cynthia Kurtz. Sorry about the problems earlier, Cynthia. After more than 30 years of experience planning and managing complex projects and programs in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including serving as Pasadena's city manager for a time, Ms. Kurtz is now a consultant and advisor to projects through management partners and as an advisor for the past 2 years for National CORE, which stands for Community Renaissance, one of the nation's largest nonprofit affordable housing developers with over 120 projects nationwide, including at least one in Pasadena. Welcome, Cynthia.
Good morning. I think I have my slideshow up.
Yes,
Is it showing?
do.
All right. Thank you, Anita, for a very nice introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here today. And yes, I am working for National Core Renaissance, National Community Renaissance. And I work throughout the San Gabriel Valley. My role is to help them find willing partners and sites to increase the supply of affordable housing in the San Gabriel Valley. Just to set the context of my presentation and what I'm going to say today, let me take the first 2 minutes to just tell you about National Core. They're a national nonprofit affordable housing developer. They don't do anything but affordable housing construction. And their mission is neighborhood revitalization by building and managing quality, service-enriched, affordable housing. They are located, their headquarters are in Rancho Cucamonga, and they're a large nonprofit. They have about 9,000 units of affordable housing. They serve about 27,000 residents in those units, and they have over 300 employees. The reason that the employee count is so high is they're a full service developer. And what that means is they kind of do it in-house soup to nuts. They develop, which means they find the sites, they do the financing plans, and they go through the approval processes that Bill talked about with the cities themselves. They have in-house construction crews to build the projects. They manage and maintain them themselves with in-house personnel. And that's good. That's one of the things I like about the company because they build quality. They're going to maintain it for the long term. And they also provide high quality residential services. They truly believe that, as Anne spoke about, the services on site are critical to make the project successful, but more importantly, to lift people up. They have a nonprofit they work with called Hope for Housing, but in the San Gabriel Valley, they work primarily with Union Station and always are pleased to find community-based organizations that the community trusts to provide services in their project. You saw this picture on Anne's slide, Mar's Place, 20 units of permanent supportive housing up on Mar Vista. A beautiful building, been there several years. And when it was built and the families first moved in, no one moved in that had a job or school. And Anne might correct me, I believe it's only one family now that doesn't have at least one member that's either in school, in training, or is employed. It really shows you that having a place to live and the support services that you need makes all the difference. This is a project that they opened about 18 months ago in Glendale, a senior project. They had 6,900 applications for the 66 units that are in this project. It was a vacant lot and the neighborhood really wanted a neighborhood park. But with city support and a lot of community outreach and a commitment to do a great design, they were able to get the project approved and it's been very well received. And I can't resist showing this rendering. National Core is really pleased to have recently been selected by the city of Pasadena to enter into exclusive negotiations with their partner, Union Station, for a 112 unit affordable senior project in Civic Center, probably the most important public space in our city. Now this is a rendering of what they're thinking the building should look like. This is not approved. It has not gone through the approval process and the design review. You'll see though there is a center courtyard and it's actually two separate courtyards that's in the middle there. One is a private courtyard for the seniors that live in the building, the residents, and the other is a public courtyard that would be open during the day. So residents in the project, along with the public from Civic Center, would be able to share that space. And we're really excited about having this opportunity. I've been asked to talk about some of the challenges that developers face. And I didn't want to just go through a slew of negative things. So I'm going to talk about some of the good things that are happening too, because there are good things. People are paying attention. COVID has kind of slid us to the side and some of the policy work that was underway, but we're optimistic that we'll return to that once we get our footing back into a more normal place. At the federal level, I think the most important thing that they do is that they provide funding. Funds project-based vouchers. The first thing I say to a city when I walk in is, do you have any project-based vouchers? It is gold for a developer because it is a guaranteed revenue stream that stays with the project, and it opens up other funding sources. And the federal government also has tax credit funding, which is the foundation for most of the layers and layers of funding that are required to bring a project forward. But tax credits are the base. Once you have that, then you're pretty confident you'll be able to move forward. People always question when they see that I say fair housing laws are a problem. And don't get me wrong, fair housing laws do exactly what they are supposed to do. They block discrimination and redlining, and they are necessary. But the unintended consequence that we see is they prevent people from seeing the connection between helping people they know in their community need housing and the projects that are built in their community. We know there are not 6,900 seniors in Glendale who applied for that 66 unit project. And that disconnect has really been something that helps the NIMBYs. It's not going to be our people. I work with churches because churches are finding that they have land, either parking they don't use, or maybe old community centers or education centers they're not using anymore. And they'd like to turn it into affordable housing. But inevitably, the conversation comes to, but we've got 8 families in our congregation that we really want to be there, or 10 seniors that we know are struggling. Can we put them in? And we have to say we can't guarantee that. We will try. We can help them qualify. We can get them on a list, but we can't guarantee that they're going to be in your project. Bill talked about the Pasadena local preference. It is the only one I know of. Bill, you said many cities do it. I would love to learn more about that because we don't find it. Pasadena is such a leader in this area. And that, I think, has really helped for why you see the success of projects in Pasadena, because people in Pasadena are getting into the projects that people are building. Other cities need to do that, but it's hard to do city by city. If we could find a way to free up some of the funding so that we could make that more consistent across the board, it would be helpful. The state was really on a roll. Governor Newsom made this his state of the state housing, the state of the state priority. They were looking at adding funding. There was a flurry of bills that made you dizzy in Sacramento. Not all of them, to my mind, good bills, but that's what the process is. You work through it. There were state properties that were being freed up. And then, of course, COVID hit. So we've gotten sidelined. But I think that it's only fair that the state actually does step up, because if we look at the historical land use and taxing policies in California, they have really contributed significantly to some of the problems we're facing. Prop 13 forced cities to give up property tax and fund essential services, our police, our fire, our parks, with sales tax. 2/3 of your dollars were coming in through commercial development, 2/3 of your dollars were being spent on residential neighborhoods. Cities had no option but to emphasize commercial development if they were going to provide the level of services that people wanted in their cities. This could have been, if states had been given property tax, or cities had been given property tax so that it was residential development paying for itself, I really think we would have had a very different effect on housing supply in this state, and this current policies contribute significantly to the lack of overall housing, which leads to the lack of affordable housing. Then, of course, in 2012, the state killed redevelopment, which was an enormous source of funding for affordable housing. They have tried to replace some of that, but it really hasn't gotten back to the level of what redevelopment was providing. And the final thing I'll just touch on here is the surplus rules. And it says state property, but it's really property. The state has done, since I put this slide together, the state really has done some things to free up some of their property and some things to say if they are surplusing land that affordable housing needs to be looked at first. But there's still some places where we know there's a lot of property that would make great sites for affordable housing. Much of it is owned by school districts. PUSD, our own district, owns 11 properties that they are not using at the time for education purposes. I think Pomona is around 13, so it's not unique to Pasadena. But there's really no incentive really for school districts to sell this property or turn it into housing or affordable housing, because if it's state-owned land, they give the money back to the state. If it's owned by the district, they are very constrained in what they can use those dollars for. And in most cases, it is just capital dollars, and that's not their highest need. If we could find ways to incentivize school districts to free up some of those properties, we would have great sites for affordable housing. LA County started out high priority for affordable housing as well. The supervisors have been greatly attentive. Measure H was passed. It was a priority for Supervisor Varga when she was running the supervisors. It was a priority for Supervisor Hilda Solis. She focused on faith-based community support. And again, COVID has kind of pushed it off of their highest agenda, at least for a period of time. The one thing that I would really wish that the county would look at, though, is their 500-foot rule, which again, was put in place for good reason. And what it says is that affordable housing cannot be built if it is within 500 feet of a freeway or a major street. A market rate housing can be. There's no restriction on that, but affordable housing cannot, or you cannot receive any county funds, I guess is a better way to say that, if you are building within that zone. What that has had the effect on San Gabriel Valley, because we have the 57 and the 605 and the 110 and the 10 and the 60 and the 210, we have more freeways in the San Gabriel Valley than most parts of the county. And so a deal of land has been taken off of the use for affordable, is not available for the use of affordable housing. And we were putting our transit down the middle of the freeway, which then is emphasizing building housing and affordable housing at the stations. And Doherty is struggling with their housing right now because they need county funds to put the affordable housing element in, and it's right by the train, and it's too close to the freeway. We believe, I would not suggest that we would just get rid of the rule, but there are things that AQMD has listed that can make housing safe, from air quality pollution from freeways and major highways, with filters, double paned windows, maintenance operations of how often filters are changed. And I would very much like to see the county adopt a process for exempting properties that are willing to go to a higher construction level. I think it is very clear that we have people living under the freeways. Let's put them in safer housing by the freeway. And finally, a lot of things here have been talked about, really need local support. And in Pasadena, the affordable housing has it, need community support. We have a great community group that makes sure that affordable housing is kept on a high priority in this city. We have an inclusionary housing ordinance. Alhambra has now adopted one as well. All those things don't exist in every city. And it's going to take a lot of leadership to turn those cities into a place as supportive as Pasadena is for the work that National Corps is doing. There's also some regional solutions that are underway. The San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments has created an affordable housing fund now. They have several $1 million in it. They're continuing to raise funds, and they're looking at providing last gap funding for projects to push them over that edge. The hesitancy or the challenge locally is what Ann talked about. People who fear that affordable housing is going to affect them, their children, their neighborhood. And we know that's not true. Marv's Place shows that's not true. But it's really a difficult challenge to people who have held that belief for a long, long time. I just quickly say, as I wrap up here then, that the other challenge is the funding sources. And this is slightly out of date, I realize. There's a couple of new ones that have come in since COVID. But these are all funding sources that affordable housing developers need to look to in order to fund their projects. And each one of them has a different process. Each one of them has a different deadline. Some of the pots are for motels, for seniors, for vets, for people that are homeless. And some of the funding plans I've seen from National Corps, they look to 8 to 10, even 12 different funding sources in order to build that stack that will make a project move forward. It is incredibly complex, which I know Bill could speak to at length. They actually have to hire people who are financial experts in order to put a financing plan together. So if I had a wish list, I'll go backwards here. Boy, it'd be nice to simplify the funding sources. And I think it would reduce the cost of providing affordable housing, at least to some extent. I would like to see more cities that had local preferences, or I'd like to see just an overall rule that cities could use, so they didn't need to go through it city by city to adopt a preference and have them all be different in each city. It really is a way to counteract some of the NIMBYism. I think that we all, for a lot of reasons, would like to see the state update their taxing policies, but there's ways that they could update those policies and support affordable housing. There's still more work to do on the surplus property rules. There's still a lot of government-owned land that could be incentivized for affordable housing. An exemption process for the 500-foot rule would be very beneficial to the San Gabriel Valley. We truly believe that county dollars are not equitably being distributed throughout the county, and for the San Gabriel Valley, the 500-foot rule is really a challenge. And I would just say for everyone here on the call, I thank you for being supporters of affordable housing. Without local groups that advocate on behalf of it, we wouldn't get projects approved anywhere, because it does not take much organizing to bring out the people who are opposed. But without some balance to that, with people that are saying yes, it is hard to get good decision making when it comes to affordable housing. And I thank you and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm looking at a long list of questions, and we probably won't get to all of them. But I'm gonna start with one that says to me that people don't understand Section 8. It looks like there are several Section 8 housing units in Altadena. How does that work? Who subsidizes these? Does this take away from units that Los Angeles County could use? I suspect Ann and Bill are gonna know the most about this.
Yeah, if I can start off. There are, I believe, 14 different housing authorities throughout the county of Los Angeles. And so each housing authority has their own allocation of Section 8 vouchers and their own territory. So Pasadena's housing authority we cover Pasadena and just a few census tracts right outside of Pasadena, a few in the north and a few to the east. But the majority of Altadena is covered by the Los Angeles County Housing Authority. And so, you know, they have Section 8 there as well. You know, the County Housing Authority has a vast territory. And so they go all the way up to Lancaster and Palmdale, for instance. So they cover all of these territories, and housing using vouchers in one eligible part of their territory does not decrease the amount. I mean, doesn't decrease the amount that housing authority has overall. So they have their housing authority something like 25,000 households that they can support every year. So Altadena is just part of their territory.
And maybe, Anne, could you explain how Section 8 works?
Probably I should explain that, since I run the Section 8 program in Pasadena, and I used to run the counties for a short time as well. So the way Section 8 works is a household has to be very low income when they start on Section 8, and they pay 30% of their income for an apartment. Usually it's a private apartment that they find. So they would pay 30% of their income, and then the housing authority would pay the difference. So in Pasadena, the average rent that a Section 8 household pays to the landlord is about $1,400 a month. $1,400. So the Section 8 tenant pays about $400 of that, and the housing authority, the Pasadena's housing authority, pays the other $1,000 to the landlord every month. So that's how the program, that's how the subsidy works.
And those funds come from the federal government, right?
That is correct. Pasadena receives about $15 million a year to help to subsidize about 1,400 households, paying about 2/3 of their rent every month. So it's a big program.
Okay. Anne, what's being done to address the intersection of NIMBY and privilege?
That's a really good question. You know, that gets to the heart of so much of what we're dealing with. I think we're doing a variety of things right now. Somebody asked me recently, what's going to end homelessness in our community? And I said, recognizing that the other person is a human being, and we other people, and it is part of privilege, right? And so we've been successful. We're doing well. What's your problem? There's something wrong with you. So we do a lot of work around trying to connect people, have people talk to people with lived experience of homelessness, meet people, understand they're just like you and me, but they've had something in their life that has, you know, created an issue or a problem, or, you know, they just don't make enough money to afford housing. So that's one of the first things that we do. We've started to do more around explaining to people why the situation exists. So we did recently a webinar on racism and homelessness, and how redlining and all of those things created these situations. Again, I mentioned keeping affordable housing over there to not disturb our beautiful little neighborhood. And Cynthia mentioned, you know, things like, does it bring down housing values? No, there's evidence that bringing in affordable housing does not. And in fact, in a lot of communities, it does just the opposite. There's evidence that if you bring in high quality affordable housing, you actually increase neighborhood property values. So we're coming at it from a variety of directions. One, the one-on-one personal, to talking about what does it do, the research in terms of your community, and then what is the history? Why are people in this situation? And it is because of policies, federal, local, state policies that have done this that we need to change. So a lot of education.
Thank you. This question, I think it requires some people to have a better understanding of something. There are those who complain of an overconcentration of affordable housing. So perhaps 91101 is an area where there's a lot more affordable housing than other areas in Pasadena. But what does it really mean to have too much in one neighborhood, I guess is what this person trying to ask. Given the amount of gentrification in Pasadena and the permanent displacement of low-income persons outside of Pasadena, how can there be an overabundance of affordable housing? And I think maybe we're confusing the idea of overconcentration with an overabundance. I don't think that's quite what's going on here. So maybe I throw this out for anybody to answer.
I'll take a crack at that. I think the way the question sounds is like it's a question that is a reaction against the argument that there's an over concentration of affordable housing, that the need for affordable housing is so great that we need to provide as much affordable housing as we can throughout the city. And it is true, even in our lowest income parts of town, the rents are still very high, more than many people can afford. But that said, one of the benefits of inclusionary housing is that it does geographically disperse the affordable housing, because the affordable housing is typically included within the new developments. So new developments typically happen in the best areas to develop in. So you get affordable housing in these best areas also, or what are called high opportunity areas, close to jobs, transportation, services, good schools, etc. So inclusionary helps to geographically disperse affordable housing, and that is a desire that we have, to geographically disperse affordable housing in Pasadena.
I would say it also comes down to the stigma attached to affordable housing. I always say, do you mean that we have too much housing that people can afford to live in? So I think we need to rethink of what we mean. We're talking housing that people can afford to live in. Nobody ever complains about overconcentration of affordable housing in poor areas. It's fine to overconcentrate affordable housing in those places. It's in my good areas that it's overconcentration. So to what Bill said, it's about how do we make it just part of the community. And so if you look at somebody or a housing unit, we're not saying, oh, they have lots of money, they can afford to live here, or, oh, they're getting some kind of assistance. We should dissolve that kind of them and us mentality.
I'd just add to both of those comments to say we're fighting an image of affordable housing that comes with the projects Anne showed. And those projects did drag down a neighborhood and made them bad places. And so rather than education, as Anne said, is needed to let people know that that's not what's being built today. And there's a whole different philosophy about what affordable housing is. Because when you tell people that it doesn't drag down a neighborhood, they don't believe it. They have those old projects in mind. And we're fighting an image of things that we saw years ago. And that's just going to take talking and taking people to visit a lot of those wonderful projects Bill is building all over the city.
If I can just put in a plug, one of the things that we started to do before COVID was we did start to do actual bus tours to various sites. We're now putting together a virtual bus tour, and we will definitely make that available to your folks, that you can actually travel around and visit, and not only visit the places, but visit the people who live there. Because I think that to put the human face to affordable housing is also really important.
Okay, I'm going to do one. I think I'm going to just do one more. And we're all concerned about the effect that COVID-19 is having on unemployment and people's ability to pay any kind of rent. Is any planning taking place to confront this problem, to help people through this problem in a way that will keep people in their apartments as we move forward and hopefully come out of this very soon?
Well, let me take a crack at this one too. So far, there have been some jurisdictions, including LA County and the city of Pasadena, that have implemented a emergency rental assistance program. So most people may know that at the federal level, at the state level, and at many local levels, that there have been eviction moratoria that have been adopted, so that people whose income is reduced because of COVID and they cannot pay their rent, that they temporarily cannot be evicted from their units. But it doesn't mean that their rent that they owe just goes away. No, it's piling up, and at some point it's going to come due. So there have been some emergency rental assistance programs that have been set up that would help to pay off some of that back rent to the landlords, directly to the landlord, which helps the landlords, because a lot of landlords are like, wow, eviction moratoria is fine, except that now I'm getting less revenue for my building. How can I keep my building? I have a mortgage to pay too, and expenses to pay, et cetera. So it's paying both that for the tenants and for the landlords. So Pasadena, we are just about ready to wrap up our our emergency rental assistance program. So we set aside $1 million and ended up helping somewhere around 250 households, renter households here in Pasadena, pay off 3 months of their back rent. And so we didn't, we spent probably about 900. We'll end up spending probably about 950 out of the $1 million that was set aside. And there's lots of other, the county's program would pay up to $10,000 per household. Ours paid $4,500. And they can be eligible for both. So we could pay off 3 months, the county could pay off other months. But there's not enough money to meet the overall demand. And the solution, as you mentioned with your, hope, was that we would all come out of this pretty soon, and that folks actually can, get back to work, because there's not enough subsidy to be able to pay everybody's back rent, in perpetuity, right? At some point, folks need to be able to get back to work, of course, safely, and we're all for that. But there's other, huge needs. The city of Pasadena and many other public agencies have been paying a lot for food insecurity. I mean, people, not only can they not pay their rent, but even, they can't feed their families. And so Pasadena has been paying for meals programs for seniors, for PUSD students, for food pantry clients, and we plan to do more. So it's a big issue. There's a lot of need out there caused by COVID. And that doesn't even, I'm not even talking about what the measures that have been taken to help the homeless population and the very vulnerable ones who are homeless during the COVID period. And a tremendous amount has been done in that space.
One of the things, though, I think that it's, important to remember, and we see this in the homelessness world, that there is a delay in the effects. So there's a lot of emergency support and help that goes in during the crisis. The crisis ends, and then, most people just kind of go back to life. And what we know is that there's usually a delay of about 18 months before we see it really hit people, because they will go through every single resource that they have, families, friends, trying to eke things together. So I think the fallout from this in a couple years is going to be, we could be seeing a flood. And what we've often seen is who takes advantage of these things are, you know, wealthy developers who come in and they get stuff cheap. We saw that after the 2008 crisis. The rich got richer and everybody else went down. So I think this is something I wish I had an answer, except we are gearing up for, again, a year, 2 years out to be really hit hard. And yet the awareness is not going to be there in the general public. So a little bit of doom for the day. Sorry, folks.
Well, reality is what it is. And we like to be aware of things going forward. Thank you all for being here this morning and being so willing to take questions and presenting us with lots of information. There have been some questions asked about sharing some of the information on your slides. I will make sure that that happens. Somebody else asked about what are the different income levels where we're talking about low, and I have that information. I will share that with our members as well, so that we all have a better picture of what's going around. There is one thing, Bill had a slide on accessory dwelling units that he didn't mention at all. Would you like a minute to talk about that program?
Sure. Thank you. I just, I knew I was over time, so I tried to cut it off. But yes, the city just closed the application window for an accessory dwelling unit pilot program. And so this is where the city would provide financial support for homeowners who either they have an existing unpermitted ADU that they want to bring up to code, or they want to create a new ADU and build a new ADU. So the city will provide very, very low cost financing to help to do this, in exchange that for the first 7 years, if they build a new ADU, for the first 7 years, they would rent to Section 8 households. After that, they can rent to whoever they want. So we just closed the application window. We received, I believe, 34 applications. We have the funding probably to fund 5 to 7 ADUs, but it's a pilot program. And we got a lot of applications for both types, for building new ADUs and for bringing existing ADUs up to code. You know, existing ADUs that are not up to code, they are life safety hazards. Just yesterday, I believe it was reported that in Rosemead, somebody died in an ADU, in an illegal garage conversion fire. And we've had that happen in Pasadena before and throughout the county. So we want to bring those up to code now that we have the opportunity to make those legal with new state laws, to make them legal. We want to take advantage of that. So we're excited. We're going to see how this goes. If it goes well, City Council may want to allocate more money to do another kind of pilot, or just to support more construction of ADUs for affordable housing.
Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Martha to wrap us up.
I'm not going to wrap you, but I do want to thank you, Anita. You really put together a wonderful program. Bill, Cynthia, and Ann, thank you so much. You know, everything you talk about really brings a lot home to me. I was one of those families. We lived in a garage. Luckily, you know, it didn't go up in flames. We were able to then get housing. We were able to get Section 8 housing. And my mom, for all her life, lived with Section 8 housing. So I do know how important the work you've done. I'm really inspired by the work that you're all doing. I hope we can continue to maintain an ongoing dialogue and to join together on advocacy for affordable housing, because this is so important. I don't think people are aware that there's new thinking about housing, that there's really solutions to these problems, and that there is a role for them to play and in helping put this into place and just making things better for all the homeless, all the ones that people, you know, want to turn their face away. They don't want to look at them. They think of them, I think you mentioned, as everybody just being either on drugs or mentally unstable or whatever it is that they don't really realize, you know, these could have been your neighbors at one point and things like that. So I hope we're going to continue to do that and look forward to actually a real partnership. So I want to thank you for coming out and explaining this to us. And again, you know, right now I want to also thank the group that put this together, Catherine Gadsby and her committee, the events committee, and Elsa Pendleton, who acted as our Zoom host. So thank you for doing that. I just want to remind the audience that this program is being recorded and that it's going to be available very soon. Just go to our league website and hit our YouTube videos and you'll be able to look at this, because there was a lot of information to absorb and it's well worth looking at it again and hearing it, because I think there's a lot of work to be done. I'm glad that Anita Mackey has been heading a housing study. As you know, the league studies any issue that we look at and we see as a community issue, a people issue, before we really come down on the side of a particular position. We don't just kind of wake up one morning and go, oh, we're going to advocate for this. So this work that she's embarked upon, the group that she's working with, is very important. And so hopefully you will go back and kind of take a look at it and share that information with your neighbors, because I think that's what we need to do. Now it's my pleasure to issue 2 invitations to all of you. And let me share my screen here. Let me see if I can find it. So you're all invited. We want you to come back and join us for our December 3rd Thursday with the League. We're going to review and evaluate the November election. We hope that by December 3rd, some things are settled. As you know, the Electoral College won't meet until December 14th. So, you know, so we may be a little premature, but we will know what's happened with how many voters came out and things like that. So we will have information. So hopefully you will come. And the other thing is to celebrate the holiday season with us. It's very important that we celebrate and we take the time to congregate, because really that's what this Winter Wonderland celebration is really all about. It's about finding an opportunity for all of us to get together. Our forum, the platform that we're going to use is actually some breakout rooms where you get an opportunity to have smaller groups talking about what they're up to, and just having a chance to put work aside and focus on community. So hopefully you will come back early next week. We hope to have the details about how you can join us, and we'll hope to see you there. And thank you very much again for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday afternoon, and take care.